Hello, everyone. You're joining us for the Theory Around the World series, where we at BDU invite remarkable practitioners who work with Theory U in various countries and fields to engage in conversations and share their experience and insights. Today, we have the great privilege of hosting Eva Pomeroy. Eva is a research lead and senior faculty at the Presencing Institute, the organization that leads the work with Theory U worldwide. She's also the co-founder and managing editor of the Journal of Awareness-Based Systems Change, a multidisciplinary open access journal, providing a platform for creative scholarship in the emerging field of awareness-based systems change. And she's also affiliate faculty in the Department of Applied Human Sciences at Concordia University, Montreal, Canada. We invited Eva to share from her experience of bringing Theory U into the university, working with students, faculty, and staff. So first of all, welcome, Eva. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for this invitation.
I want to start actually with you before we move to the academic world and ask you what brought you to work with Theory U and how did you get to do this work at all?
Very fortunately is how I get to do this work. My story really, I was at the university and I took some time off, went for maternity leave. And when I was coming back, I wanted to reconnect with what had been happening in the field while I had been away for a few years. And in the time where I'd been away, Theory U had been published. And so went to a workshop that Otto and Arawana were holding nearby, near my home, got the bug, and this was just before ULab launched. And so, ULab was brought into my awareness. I took it the first time as a participant, and my mindset going in was really about, what can I take from this for my classes? What can I take for this for my work? So it's, a little bit extractive, right? But I really, I dove in wholeheartedly, and my own personal experience of the process was it was so profound. And it was so surprising to me that, I could get that much insight and really move that much myself in terms of my own sort of understanding of myself and my place and purpose in the world, that I thought, I don't want to take just pieces of this. I really want to make this process available in any way I can in the university and for the students. And so, it became sort of my framework for my work, my framework for my life. And I did everything I could to bring it into my work as much as I could.
So when you met it and when you thought about bringing this into university, in what ways did you find it relevant to the challenges that Concordia University and perhaps academia more generally is facing?
Yeah. And I can answer that for that moment and even how that's evolved since.
Yeah.
And, I think, while there are some students who may come into university with a sense of purpose, some clarity, I think so many come in a more exploratory phase, not knowing exactly what they might want to do in the world, or even having a sense of having a purpose. And so there was something about the Theory framework and the process that helped students to make sense of what they were learning, right, in their various disciplines, but in a way that was very personally relevant, right? So, it's transdisciplinary, and so it can be useful for any student from business to geography to the fine arts to take that body of learning and then through the U process really connect with themselves and what their sense is of, kind of is theirs to do, right? And what some actions might be. So there's something about grounding in purpose. That would be one thing. And I think the other thing is that because the method, so much of the method and the tools are about getting out, right? Getting out of your bubble, getting out of your space, so that for the students of their space at that time is the university, the practices get them out talking to different people in different ways, get them into new spaces. And so, that sort of interweaving of what's actually happening in the world, in their context, and what they're learning. First, it gives them immediate feedback about whether what they're sort of learning and thinking and doing is relevant and needed. But it also brings all of that kind of richness and reality back into their learning. So that interweaving is another part.
Yeah.
And then I'd say the third thing, and this is actually more kind of increasingly relevant as we go on, is, I might describe theory as a methodology for becoming, that because you're leaning into the emerging future and you're sensing into what's yours to do and what's yours to do next. It provides a framework, and it provides a method for how to do that. And I think this is something that, young people stepping into the world, I think the statistic is 70% of the jobs that, say, our children may have available to them haven't been invented yet, right? So they're stepping into a world that's just so much in its making. They will very likely need to kind of reinvent themselves a few times. And so to provide them with a whole framework for, like, how do you do that? How do you sense into what's needed and change and adapt and step into that? So
I love methodology for becoming. That's another term you're coining now. It's beautiful. So let's drill down to how it actually happened. So from what I learned from you, you actually brought like students, undergrads, graduates, some of the administrative faculty all together to ULab Hub at Concordia University. So what do you actually do? What was the intention behind bringing all these people together? How did it work? Can you shed some light on that?
yeah, and maybe I'll just say a little bit about how I got to that point, because I think it's helpful just around this idea of prototyping. Like, so there's this body of work, I want to bring it in. What can I do first, right? And what can I do
Exactly.
immediately, right? And so, in the most immediate, it was like, let me just try out little pieces of this in what I'm teaching right now, this moment, right? So I'm taking ULab, I'm teaching. How about if I bring levels of listening in? How does that resonate? How does that, and getting a sense of, oh, actually, this really, students get it, they appreciate it. Bringing in some of the interviews from the guest faculty in ULab, how does that sit with the students and what do they get from it? So I did a little bit of kind of very, very early stage kind of feeling it out. And then, of course, you do what you can within your sort of sphere of influence, right? So I can't change the whole system. I was a faculty member, but I can plan and design classes. And so my first early iteration was a summer course for a group of undergraduate students, a 1-week intensive. The undergraduate degree is human relations, and there was a sort of a human relations lab. It was like a final year, final course. And so I designed that as a Theory U process with a group of 20 students, again, just to see how all these pieces fit together. And it was so powerful for them, and particularly powerful as they were on the cusp of leaving the university, again, with, this methodology for how you sense into the future and step into it rather than plan. So these were a few building blocks that helped me to feel like, no, this will work. This is going to resonate with this group. And so then, of course, part of ULab is, or one of the things that's invited are hubs to bring people together. So there was that model already and a little bit of support around that, some guidance and other people who had done it. And then there was some interest in the community because I had connected with people locally in Montreal who were also doing ULab. But I think part of what drove this, and I think part of what drives innovation sometimes, is just need. And I thought, well, I have a family, I have a job. If I create this hub and do that as something on the side as well, I mean, it's just not feasible. So how do I bring this hub idea and this idea of using ULab with students together? And, when things align, I think there's just a lot of support that shows up, right? So I was able to get some curriculum innovation funding to design a new course. And it can be quite hard to get a new course into the, into the curriculum.
The system.
But yeah, into the system, exactly. But there was this curriculum innovation, this call for proposals, and was able to get that money. And so I designed the course for undergraduate students. So suddenly it's then actually already embedded in the system. And embedded in my own kind of work profile, if you like. And then was able to also get some money because my faculty was very interested in lab learning. So there was some funding available to get a small team together to do outreach to the community. And so we would have some outreach, we would call them tasters, come for a few hours, have a little taste of Theory U, let us tell you what a hub is and what it will look like. And we did that both internally for staff and faculty and externally to our local community of, just anybody really who's involved in kind of social change. or systems change.
Mhm.
And so we ran that hub. We would meet weekly throughout the fall semester. We would sometimes watch live sessions together and then have, dialogues or different practices. We would sometimes meet to do coaching circles. There's always a space for anybody in our community to, bring in a practice that they wanted to share that was relevant to the stage that we were at. And so, through that, we ended up with this kind of multi-generational, mixed community, student, staff and faculty learning community to go through a U process. And so, and I guess the last thing I would say is, I know this could be done around a topic. We didn't. We did it really as a learning community and a holding space for anybody who is interested in sort of social and systems change.
What were the challenges in doing such a process? I mean, obviously, universities sometimes can be very hierarchical, graduates, undergraduates, administrative, faculty, people of the community. How did that work, and were there other challenges in the process?
Yeah. I mean, initially, so I first started this in 2016. And one of the challenges for me was, we were integrating mindfulness, contemplative practices, which this is just a statement about how much the dial has shifted on that. I think now this would be sort of a non-point.
Non-issue.
A non-issue, but I remember sitting with the provo at the time, because they were interested in social innovation and brought in, and he was asking what this was and was talking about the process. And as soon as I said mindfulness, he'd been sitting back, he sat right up and he said, "What does that look like?" And so, there was definitely something about, okay, we're bringing different ways of being in a classroom. And he just, there was some sensitivity about what that might be. Might there be any kind of issues with that politically? Is it robust enough, rigorous enough to be in an
Yeah.
academic
More like
setting?
academic rigor, like how does that, yeah.
Right. How does that, you're all sitting in a circle and you're being still and silent. What does this mean? And so there was something there, and I needed to find kind of allies and people who were aligned, who supported it, who were at least interested in experimentation, right? If not completely aligned. There were other people who were completely aligned. I had a lot of support from we have a unit called the Center for Teaching and Learning, who are just very interested in great pedagogy, right? That's their work. And so quite open to experimenting. I was able to use their space, right? And so I had, just some, there was also a dean actually of engineering in society. That was her role. And it was about helping engineers to bridge what they were learning with, society and societal needs. So she was very interested in this as a process. And in the early years, she was a bridge for me as well to kind of lend support. So I definitely needed to find people in various places at the university who were willing to kind of stand up for this as a process. And then once it got started, then there's proof of concept, because then you've got students, undergraduate and graduate, people from the community and staff saying, no, this is a great thing for us to have. Yeah.
I'm curious about this mixture between the academic standards, as we started talking about, like the academic rigor, and what's happening in these settings. Because I think many of us, when we try to bring Theory U to places who operate under a different paradigm of thought about what are the relevant practices, what's legitimate, what's considered as knowledge, it's like really trying to bring this to the place where much more like logical, scientific, objective knowledge is what's regarded. So how did people react to this when you actually, when they were in the room with the faculty? Did that evolve over time?
Well, I mean, I would say, so the students, I think, initially were kind of a bit perplexed by it. I mean, my department with a degree in human relations, they are quite used to circle, and they are quite used to group work and practical work. So, but I think they're a bit perplexed by the size and kind of the diversity of that particular space, and by some of the integration of mindfulness and some of the languaging. But they, curious as well. So I think they came, and it was very important for me to be alongside to answer any questions and to kind of make some of the connections between this and a traditional class. What I would say though, other than that, I think probably because we were housed in a space that was quite curious about it anyway, I didn't feel like there was much that came, that I came up against. But I would also say that, alongside this classroom experience, I've got all of the kind of protocols that you would for a class, right? So there's a course outline, assignments, readings to be done. We've got an online platform that you call Moodle. I had the online platform, and you could see each week, here, I'd like you to watch these 3 videos. I'd like you to read this chapter and this other reading, right? So you need to complement, part of the academic rigor is not just going with one body of work. You
Yeah.
need to, what else helps to build this up? And so all the markers and all the components of a traditional class were there, but what happened in the classroom was very different. And I guess I would say also what supports that is there are moves. There are things like people talk about blended learning, and they talk about the flipped classroom. And I think as technology has become just so prolific, I think a lot of folks, particularly in the teaching end of academia, are thinking about, okay, how do you best use the time you have together? They can get all the information they need online, videos and the rest of it. But what is it that you can only do when you're physically together in a classroom? Let's do that. So I think we were also part of that wave. Yeah.
And were there any lessons for people? And I think you're right. People are extremely, interested now in creating these blended, the new forms of learning. What are some of the major, I don't know, tips or things that you think from this experience we should keep in mind when we're trying to bring that?
Well, I think there are a couple of, there are a number of things. I think that the value of the students getting out of the classroom and into other spaces is huge. And also that you need to kind of recognize that's going to be some extra work. I think anybody in academia will. And I would say almost that because I was leaning on ULab, if you like that was my main framework, the work that I might in another class be putting into generating all the content, it kind of freed me up a bit to then be able to put the energy into, okay, how can we get out of the classroom? How can we also, by bringing the outside in, I mean, anybody who is able to do that, anybody whose structure allows for that, it was such an incredible experience. And I didn't anticipate, I had thought, oh, it just be great for the students to have people from the community who may already be working in the fields that they're kind of curious about, sitting next to them and having the dialogue and being in coaching circles together. And students did say that. I remember there was a graduate student saying, oh, actually, our feedback from the real world is right here. It's embodied in these people. And that worked beautifully. What I didn't anticipate, but just loved, was how many people from the community afterwards said, thank you so much. I have no opportunity to speak to young people. So to be in these, intimate circles, really coming to understand what their worlds are looking like and what they're thinking was such a gift. And so wherever that's possible, it is extra work, but it's such a
It really enriches people's perspective from both sides. And I think this intergenerational thing that you're is often, I think, something that we miss. I mean, we're creating like multi-field or sectors, but not necessarily like generational. That seems to be very profound.
Yeah.
You're a couple of years after you launched this, what are some of the impacts you're seeing from trying out this experience at the university?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think for me, it's like it's a statement about the reality of systems change, is that we ran this hub for 4 years, and I knew that it was a really excellent learning experience for all involved because of the immediate feedback. But I was never sure about systemic impact. Like that's ultimately what you want to have. And I thought, well, what would that need to look like? Would I need to be working with all the deans? Would so and the pandemic hit, which then brought all this to a close. So, it was one of the things I had wondered. But then in the last few years, I've come to understand how some of the things that were seeded here really have made some change, more in kind of student life, I would say. So there's one small group, and out of their ULab, they were very, they were 3 young people who were kind of concerned about what are we going to do with our degrees? What are we going to do with our lives? What's out there? Like what does the world of work, really look like? They connected with the dean of students who happened to be taking, in the ULab hub that year. And through their conversations, realized, he said, well, the university is like a small town. I mean, there's so many, if you're just interested in trying to understand what various occupations exist, you've got it all here. And so they then did ULab 2X the next semester, and they were able to do it as independent studies with me supervising them. So again, wherever I could embed this and students could get credit for this work, I feel like that's a really important piece, so that it's not a kind of an extracurricular. So through 2X, the first iteration of this was to just go out and see, are there staff in the university who'd be willing to spend half a day with you? Like, let's just see if that's possible. So that was their initial small prototype. Their second kind of iteration in the ULab 2X was to see, can they then start to organize this for other students? Can they get small groups of students and staff around the university to pair up and to have these experiences? And then they came together and debriefed. But by the end of that process, they had gone so well that for their final paper, I said, well, make this paper a grant application. Make it really, which they did, got the grant. And one of those students then worked the whole next year with our Student Services Center to create something that they call Concordia Connect, which is now embedded in the Student Services unit as opportunities for students to kind of enhance their experience by becoming more aware of the various domains of work. Kind of, they called it like behind the curtain of the university, right? And so that's a program that now exists. The other thing that I was less aware of, but I feel like is even a greater systemic intervention, is that that dean of students came in with some of his staff, and they had this seed idea of we call them homerooms. Like so in a North American high school, every day you start your day in your homeroom, right? And it's one group with and that's where you get announcements about things, and it's just sort of your touch point. They recognize kind of the loneliness of university, the mental health challenges, and this was before the pandemic. This was still really up, and that kind of social isolation. And we're thinking about, what can we do for all these students? They're really struggling. And they had this idea of homerooms. They came out of ULab, they pitched it to the provost. The provost said, interesting, but no, right? But then that was in 2019. Then the pandemic hit, and the provost came back and said, okay, we need something. Our young people are really suffering, but you need to do it in this way, and you need to partner with these units in the university. And basically they evolved this so that it's a program where senior students hold homerooms or pods for for students coming in. Anybody in the whole university, there are 40,000 students. Anyone who wants to can join a homeroom, and then they've got this group that will meet regularly with a person who's holding that space, touch point for sharing information, but also just sort of social connection and support, and that sense of belonging as they move through their university career. So yeah, so those would be the two that stick out. There's some other things that have been seeded as well.
So you're both of these examples are obviously like kind of going up the U, and I think that's one of the places I'm puzzled about, because the learning and going down the U makes so much sense. There's so much new ways of thinking the theory U is bringing into this, and then going up is obviously much more complicated, right? It's like people need to move into action, and that creates different set of challenges. And I wonder, I know that you've coined the term from your research like action confidence. If you can help us understand that, which is really related to this going up the U, putting it on the lens of these prototypes and these actions that actually took place at the university. So how do we understand this concept through this experience?
Yeah. Okay. So maybe I'll just say two things about action confidence, and then how it's spelled out. So the way that the term first came to me was through research with the ULab Scotland. So Scotland had picked up ULab in a big way. There was some research done, and I was able to partner around that. The first expression of it is really related actually to the concept of prototyping and 0.8 prototyping, and doing something not to kind of perform and get it right, but you do something so that you can learn, so that you can build. When people talked about feeling more courageous, they often in the first instance connected it to that. Okay, so because a lot of these people actually were in their professional setting, so thinking, oh, okay, there's some small things I can do, and they don't have to be perfect, and that's really empowering. But when you really double click on that, like what is it that even sources the desire to take that step, it is something deeper, and it is that connection to a sense of purpose. You know, sometimes, or in theory, you read the statement and people say this, I can't not do it.
Mm.
So there's something about connecting on a level that, you know, on an inner level, there's just such a rightness that's what sources the courage to take the first step. And so just in general with students, you know, that played out in different ways. For some students, it was simply like, oh, this thing that I've kind of thought that I'd like to do, but you know, the voice in my head said, well, that's just, you know, that's crazy, or that's never going to work. Something about, you know, maybe seeing that mapped out in a 3D model, thinking, wow, okay, this little feeling I have, it's real and it's valid and it's worth pursuing. You know, and then other students who actually did start to do, you know, so this is an example I haven't talked about, but a young woman who really wanted to do work for groups of young women around, you know, sort of empowerment and confidence and stepping into the world. And she'd always imagined that's something she would do when she graduated. But through the process, because there was a project, right, that they needed to do, she was like, well, okay, I'll just give it a go. And she tried it out with a group of maybe 6 or 7 other young women, and it went incredibly well. And she said, "Oh, I can't believe I'm starting to do this now, and I'm not going to stop." Like, I mean, so there's something there. And so I would say equally with these projects that, you know, you've got, I'd say with the students who did the Connect Concordia, it would have been kind of a sense of frustration. I would definitely say when they started, they're like, but we don't really, we're learning all this stuff, but we have no idea if it's relevant or how we'll use it or what's out there. So instead of to just kind of stew in that frustration, but the method helps validate that this matters, right? What you're sensing inside, if you know, when you experience it in this way, it matters. And then that there are, you know, kind of supports and methods around to make this happen. So their first proposal was, we'll design a program for, you know, 30 students to go. This was, and to just to have peel that back and say, first step, let's see if 1 staff member will meet with you. You know, now let's see if 3 will. Now that, you know, so to give them some support in that. But it started with that action confidence comes from feeling something deeply, and then these methods and tools helping, you know, supporting you know, supporting that the attention on those issues is valid and important and real.
So it's
I'm
like
yeah,
keeping the connection to your intent, like
right.
along the way, and then building it like very, very small pieces where you can see how it builds along the
Yeah,
way.
yeah. And I would say even especially for students, maybe for everyone, validating that intention is worthwhile. That was a big part of it too. Yeah.
So when you think about the potential that hasn't been fulfilled yet about bringing, you know, this connection between Theory U and the work in academia, which, you know, with everything happening around and the way, you know, the not artificial intelligence and etc. A lot of people think like, you know, where is university taking us in that respect? How do you think, or where is the potential that we haven't seen yet manifest of bringing these two together? What can Theory U help with the challenges we're facing now?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a few things, and so one is around the you know, the head, heart, and hands, right? Or the open mind, open heart, open will, knowing, right? So you know, as we both know, academia is so heavily leans so heavily towards the cognitive, right? Essential, but not everything. And clearly it hasn't done the job, right? It's not meeting the needs. And so I think Theory U would be one of, you know, a number of approaches and methodologies and frameworks that are saying we need to bring in other ways of knowing, and we need to do this in a way that they can be, you know, it's not just sort of there's some structure around it, right? Some way of bringing in our sensing capacities with method, you know, so that we can really work with data, if you like, or work with knowing that isn't being generated from a mind, right? And I think that, I mean, I'm seeing that in a number of different spaces. and including here in Canada with a real effort around indigenizing. So working in partnership and with greater understanding of Indigenous knowledge systems, where that integration is just there. It's just in the entire worldview, the integration of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual ways of knowing. And so, but you'll see this depending on where you are in the world, that the expanding epistemologies is coming from all kinds of directions. And so Theory U is one way of bringing in those epistemologies where there is already an existing framework. There are already tools and methods that are drawing on a much wider range of knowing. And so I think that its potential is that we're at this moment, or at the cusp of this moment, where there's wider spread recognition of this need, and the frame already is there and is helpful and is accessible and understandable.
Yeah. Well, we started with you, and I think I want to ask the last question, bringing it back to you. Working with you, as you said, is such a personal work. It's systemic and personal, and in that sense, I know it often has a profound impact on oneself. I know it did on me. I wonder how being engaged with this work, being immersed in this work for so many years, has impacted you personally.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, in every way. So in some ways it's a hard question to answer, but what would I say? I would start by saying, almost every situation when I have the wherewithal, or when there's something about, okay, here's whatever's happening around me. There is a pause, right? And that has entered into my life as a virtue of Theory U, which can manifest as, okay, I'm in this kind of mental debate, or this space. Can I just open? So I often think about Arowana talking about the back. And so when I'm really in something, I can bring to mind, okay, just open the back. What am I not hearing? Where can I bring more spaciousness to this? And that kind of follows all the way through. So I mean, the pause can also happen in a really difficult interpersonal piece, right? Around to, pause, step back, and just allow some openness or some space to come into this. And then, equally, I think probably most significantly, is that reminder or framework or capacity to be with that uncertainty and the discomfort. There's so much of it right now, right? So to find yourself in the discomfort, and just to stop and just let it be there. And to, it is the letting go and letting come, but it's really like, okay, just let's bring some space, let's bring some openness to what is happening, bring some spaciousness to what is happening, and then to pay attention to what emerges. So there, I guess one piece would be around bringing spaciousness, and the other is exactly the action confidence. It's like, okay, those little senses, they matter. And when there's that impulse to act from that place, do it. Do it. Yeah.
We definitely need more of that. Thank you so much, Eva. I really appreciate this conversation, and you're willing to share with us. I do hope we can bring more of this to university, both here and other places in the world.
Yeah, as do I. It's been wonderful to talk to you.